All right, thanks, Adam. General Bolduc, you have been criticized over some remarks you made in the months following the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade, like saying Senator Hassan should, quote, get over it, referring to her concerns about abortion rights, and that abortion debate is a distraction from really important issues. Do you think Granite Staters are concerned about the right to an abortion, and is the issue important?
Well, of course, it's a very important issue, and that's why it's a state rights issue, and it's an issue that me and my opponent will not be dealing with in the United States Senate. And that's as simple as I can state it. It is a state issue. I agree with the state law, and I will support that. That's the end of what I have to say about it.
So if you say abortion is a state issue, will you promise to voters that you will vote no on any abortion bill that comes to the Senate floor?
I have done that. I have done that. I have promised to all Granite Staters that I will not vote for any federal legislation that has to do with abortion. It is a state rights issue.
And Senator Hassan, you said that you will fight any effort to outlaw abortion in Congress, but have not said if there should be any limits at all or if you're willing to compromise on legislation. Critics have called your position out of touch and extreme. Do you think the right to an elective abortion should be guaranteed up until birth?
Well, Jean, I want to thank you for the question, and to you and Steve for moderating, for being on the panel, and to Adam for moderating, and thank you to WMUR and the Institute on Politics and Don Bolduc for participating, and everybody who's tuning in at home. And I do look forward to talking about my bipartisan record of delivering results for Granite Staters. Now, let's be clear about abortion rights. This is about a fundamental right of a woman to make her own health care decisions and her health and safety, and I believe strongly that those decisions have to be made by a woman and her doctor. Now, let's talk about Don Bolduc's extremism on this issue, how out of step it is with Granite Staters, and how hard he's trying to conceal his record. He has said that he would never vote against pro-life legislation in the U.S. Senate. He has said that we should rejoice when Roe v. Wade was overturned. He said gentlemen in the legislature should decide these issues for women. He is a yes vote for a nationwide abortion ban, and he's trying to conceal that from voters.
General Bolduc, 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a lie and another lie, along with all the lies that she's been telling to Granite Staters since she started campaigning. That is an absolute lie. I have no record. She's got the record. And she does believe in abortion up to the time of birth. She's voted on it twice in the United States Senate. She's the one on the record. She's the one that is extreme, and that's the bottom line. I don't have a record. I just have a promise of 33 plus years in the military of honorable service where I have never lied. I haven't lied in this campaign, and I haven't lied about her.
Senator, 30 seconds.
People can see videos of Don Bolduc talking about his position on reproductive freedom at bolducfacts.com, along with a number of other positions where he's really working to conceal his extremism from Granite Staters. At the end of the day, this is about women making their own health care decisions. As you know, I'm a sponsor of the Women's Health Protection Act as well.
So, Senator Hassan, if federal legislation were to mirror New Hampshire law guaranteeing the right to an abortion, but only until 24 weeks, would you vote for it?
You know, I've had lots of conversations with Granite Staters who talk about how the state abortion ban has impacted them, and several women who would not have been able to get critical medical care if that abortion ban had been in place when they needed it. These are complex and tragic situations. The idea that legislators instead of doctors should be making these decisions, that politicians like Don Bolduc should be making these decisions instead of women and their doctors, is really outrageous, and it is truly out of step with where Granite Staters are. Granite Staters believe in individual freedom, and this is about whether women are going to be pulled back into a status of second-class citizenship, or whether they are going to be trusted with their capacity and their moral compass to make these difficult and tragic decisions. But at the end of the day, one-size-fits-all policies by politicians like Don Bolduc threaten a woman's freedom and her health and safety.
General, you were invoked there. 30 seconds, then we're moving on.
Well, first of all, I'm not a politician. Secondly, Senator Hassan, once again, hasn't even answered the question. That was the finest Washington, D.C. career politician non-answer I've ever heard. She believes in abortion up to the time of birth. She believes that the federal government should be involved in it. She doesn't support the New Hampshire law. I believe the federal government should stay out of it. And I believe in the state rights and the state law. And that is the end of the discussion.